The democracy of the United States of America was already a rotting corpse on the ground going back to the late 1970s and Buckley versus Vallejo, which of course started the influx of big money buying our politicians, whether it's from individual millionaires and billionaires or from corporations, started in the late 1970s. And then there were more cases over time that chipped away at the campaign finance protections, the minimum campaign finance protections that we had in place to begin with. So another example, of course, is Citizens United in 2010. That was a big one. And the ruling of in Citizens United said that unlimited campaign contributions from corporations to outside political groups is fine. So, and unions too. So unions and corporations could spend as much money as they want on outside political groups. So that's what that case said. Well, today we just got the ruling in the McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission case, and the Supreme Court again ruled with the rich and the powerful, and they now decided to shoot that rotting corpse that's on the ground that is our democracy. Light it up, shoot it in the face with an AK-47 a couple extra times here. Quote, the Supreme Court struck down limits in federal law on the overall campaign contributions the biggest individual donors may make to candidates, political parties, and political action committees. The justices said in a 5-4 vote that Americans have a right to give the legal maximum to candidates for Congress and president, as well as to parties and PACs, without worry that they will violate the law when they bump up against a limit on all contributions, set at $123,200 for 2013 and 2014. That includes a separate $48,600 cap on contributions to candidates. So they basically went a step further now, whereas in the past, what we had was unlimited. So what Citizens United did, they said unlimited contributions to outside political groups that can then spend on the elections. But now this says, no, now you can give unlimited campaign contributions to candidates, political parties, and political action committees. So it kind of broadens out Citizens United and makes it a lot worse, puts it on steroids. Now, here's another part. This is the cutest part here. Quote, but their decision does not undermine limits on individual contributions to candidates for president or Congress, now set at $2,600 every election. And the reasoning is, well, of course, if we get rid of that cap on direct contributions from an individual to an individual candidate, well, then that would lead to corruption. So we have to have that cap. Sure. Is this some kind of fucking joke? It's like an SNL skit. So this is actually the reasoning of the Supreme Court. Well, we need to have the cap for an individual to donate to an individual politician. But there should be no caps whatsoever, and they just ruled against caps if you're spending for not a candidate, individual one, but candidates. You can spend unlimited for candidates and political parties, so the Democrats or the Republicans, and for political action committees, which of course basically represent the individuals anyway. So we need the cap for individuals because, oh God, that would be corrupt if we get rid of that cap. But if it's not for an individual, if it's for a group of candidates, or if it's for the super PAC, which is still just the candidates really, or if it's for political parties, spend away! No cap whatsoever! And that's not corruption. No, that's totally different, man. We don't see corruption there at all. And I like how comically set the limits were in the first place. They're like, okay, guys, let's figure this thing out here. Well, let's set the limit at $123,200 for contributions to people in Congress. Who decides? So, how does this work? What, when somebody gets $122,000, they go, thank you, I appreciate this, but I'm not going to do anything in return for it because that's not enough. The limit where I start becoming corrupt is $123,200. No, it's obviously corrupt, whether you give them $80,000, $10,000, or $123,200. They're just making shit up as they go along, the Supreme Court. Like, oh, nope, over $123,000, that might have been corrupt, but under that, that's not corrupt. But it doesn't matter now because they got rid of that cap anyway, too. And they got rid of the $48,600 cap for something else. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. And now let's get to the quotes here because this is the best. Chief Justice John Roberts said, quote, "The aggregate limits do not act to prevent corruption." Well, actually, you know what? That's true, man. They don't act to prevent corruption. Because giving money at all is going to be corruption. The whole process of people giving money to politicians, of course they want something back in return for that. You're telling me a politician is not going to feel obligated to help you out when President Obama, for example, or Mitt Romney, they both raised over $1 billion from private interests. You're not going to feel responsible to the people that gave you the money? For fuck's sake, I feel responsible if somebody loans me $5 to get a sandwich. But nope, if they give you $1 billion, you're not going to feel responsible to it. He's actually saying that, the limits don't act to prevent corruption. Really? So you're basically saying corruption is impossible. And he said this in the Citizens United case, too. He had this ridiculous quote, honestly, one of the dumbest quotes in American history. You know, this idea that, it's not even that, this is going to lead to corruption. It doesn't even lead to the appearance of corruption to spend money on politicians. So let me ask you a question. You know that $4 billion subsidy that ExxonMobil gets every single year? Why do they get that? Why do they get that? The argument is, it's for research and development. They need it. That's what Congress says, is they sign away $4 billion to them every year out of our pockets, out of hardworking middle-class taxpayers' pockets. They say they need it for research and development. But wait a second, they're one of the most profitable corporations in the world anyway. That's not incentive enough to want to find the places to get the oil? No, the reason why they get the money is because they spend a tremendous amount of money lobbying the politicians in both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. So they get what the fuck they want. We just did a story yesterday. GE lobbies tremendously for this loophole where they don't have to pay taxes on deals that they do overseas. And other financial institutions don't have to pay taxes on deals that they do overseas. So, you know what? How much revenue the government is missing out on? $62 billion over a 10-year period. And the reason why they got that is because they lobbied the politicians and gave them so much money to run their campaigns. It's I scratch your back, you scratch mine. It's human nature. If you're taking money from somebody and then you're allowed to run the ads that allow you to get your name out there and win the election, of course you're going to feel responsible to help the people out that helped you and gave you money. And that's the problem, is that all the politicians are representing the donors. They're not representing the constituents. And almost every single time, the needs of the constituents are not the same as the needs of the donors. That's why you always see massive corporate welfare. Why do you think, here's a great way of putting it. Why do you think that on Wall Street, they got a bailout? Remember when the Great Recession happened in 2008, the subprime mortgage crisis? They got bailed out. Billions of taxpayer dollars, a blank check with no strings attached, and then they turned around and gave bonuses to the same idiots that bankrupted their companies in the first place. You don't deserve a bonus. You should be fired. You did a terrible fucking job. So why did they get a bailout? Meanwhile, think about it. If the local, Korean dry cleaners down the street runs into financial troubles, do they get a bailout from Congress? Do they rush a bill through, we need to save this dry cleaners. It's important. This community needs to have a dry cleaner. Everybody has to look pristine. They need their stuff to be taken care of before they go to work. We need this place. It's staple in the community. We need to pass a bailout. The local deli doesn't get a bailout. The local pizzeria doesn't get a bailout because the fucking small businesses didn't grease the politicians. If they did grease the politicians, they would get a fucking bailout if things went south. This idea that, money does not affect these people, it doesn't lead to corruption, and not even theoretically, it doesn't even look like it's corruption. You have to be a fucking idiot to think that, man. You really do. And then here's the final quote I'll give you. Quote, "The overall limits intrude without justification on a citizen's ability to exercise the most fundamental First Amendment activities." That was from Chief Justice John Roberts. He's saying, well, obviously we had to rule this way because we'd be going against the First Amendment if we didn't. He's saying that money equals free speech. Think about how absurd that is. First of all, if the Founding Fathers wanted money to equal free speech, they would have fucking said it in the First Amendment. They would have said, by the way, just to clear up any kind of questions that might come in the future, by free speech, we also mean currency. We also mean money. But they didn't do that. Why? Because that's not what they fucking meant. They obviously didn't mean that. Because if money equals free speech, then, of course, by definition, the person in a democracy with the loudest voice is going to be the person with the most money. So Sheldon Adelson, this billionaire mogul, of course his voice is going to be worth more than your voice. He gave millions of dollars to these politicians. You think they care more about what Sheldon Adelson says? Or they care more about what some grandma in the middle of Cleveland says who voted in every single election, but she's only got $612 to her name? You're not equal in that scenario. Sheldon Adelson has a louder voice, and that violates the principle of one man, one vote. That also violates the principle of equal protection under the law. So the way the system is right now and the way they keep ruling, we don't mean anything. The Koch brothers run our elections. Sheldon Adelson runs our elections. Foster Friess, the other billionaire, runs our entire political system. Even people on the left, this is why this isn't a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats alike should be pissed off about this. Because nobody sitting in the middle of Alabama, a hardcore Republican named Cletus watching NASCAR right now, he doesn't want his politicians to be unaccountable any more than I want them to be unaccountable. Do they want George Soros coming in and buying elections? Of course they don't fucking want that to happen. That's insanity. And this leads to the final point. This was already the case before, but it's becoming even more and more solidified now. It's set in stone, man. This is fucking concrete we're talking about here. We don't have a democracy anymore. You know, we're supposed to be, the United States of America is supposed to be, in theory and on paper, a constitutional republic and a representative democracy. We're not effectively a democracy anymore. That's not how we function. We function as a kleptocracy. You could call it a kleptocracy, or an oligarchy, or a plutocracy. Those are all political science terms that basically mean the same thing. Government of, by, and for the rich. We need to reverse this trend, man. And the only way to reverse it is, you can't do it by passing a law, because a law can just be repealed by the next, Congress, or it could be vetoed by whatever president happens to be in office at the time. So a law is not going to do it, you know? And furthermore, the Constitution is the law of the land. And the Supreme Court just ruled that the Constitution, under the First Amendment, money equals free speech. So even if you pass a law, it's already invalid. It's already void because the Constitution overrides it. And according to how the Supreme Court ruled, no, you're allowed to spend whatever you want. Doesn't matter. A law doesn't change that. So you know what that means? What's the only way to change it? To get a constitutional amendment. You have to get a constitutional amendment. And thankfully, and I'm proud to say that, you know, I'm a member of TYT Network, and the Young Turks and Jank are fighting harder than anything to try to get this constitutional convention, to get the amendment passed, to say that money does not equal free speech. There is no such thing as corporate personhood. Trying to restore our democracy. And if you want to join in the fight, you can sign the petition. It's wolf-pac.com, wolf-pac.com. And if not, if you want to do more than just sign the petition, which takes, no time at all, you can donate, whether it's $5 or $10 or whatever, or become a member and consistently give, or actually start, doing some footwork and making some phone calls and getting things accomplished that way. When we did a shirt drive recently, a SecularTalk shirt drive, we donated all the proceeds to that to Wolfpack. So we're not just talking here. This isn't all talk. We're talking about action too. I don't know how much we raised, whether it was $150, $300 or whatever, but it went to Wolfpack because we need it, man. We got to all be part of the solution. And Jank always says, I didn't know this, but apparently every single generation of Americans has passed a constitutional amendment, except for ours. So we're overdue. And this is certainly the right amendment to try to get through.